You may feel like a fish out of water. You may have a lot to learn. You may be finding yourself in new companies and roles more frequently, something that's really hard to learn until you go through it. Starting a new job, a new role, a new company, and make sure you clear the baggage first. And the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is get support in that transition. Knowing how to start new things well is a superpower and a skill that will set you apart. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to talk to you about something that's really hard to learn until you go through it. I want to talk to you about what I learned when starting new jobs in new industries, in new companies, in new roles, and even in a new language. And yes, I've started new roles with all of those things changing at once. It's funny because early in my career, I once got advice from one of the organizations that felt like you shouldn't change more than one thing at once. Well, first of all, I think that's very antiquated now. I think it was antiquated then. But the point was like, make the growth incremental versus having to learn multiple things at once. And I get it, because having to learn multiple things at once is difficult, but it's not impossible. I think right now, a lot of folks are being displaced. You may be finding yourself in new companies and roles more frequently. And so I'm glad you're here to tune in to this counsel that I have for you today. And quite frankly, I might be going back and forth with my notes because I don't want to miss anything. So the counsel I'm going to give to you is kind of an amalgamation of different times in which I started new companies and new cultures. And yes, I did enter a new company in which the product was all in Spanish and most employees spoke Spanish or were bilingual. I was one of the few that were not. And so I had a huge learning curve. And this all gets compounded when you are actually taking on a role somebody else or several other people have had in the past. And this can be really sticky. So for example, I was coming in one of my new positions, new companies, new industries, and I was tasked with basically being an internal marketing consultant for the many different product lines that were run by many different leaders. And this is really touchy because, of course, they've been doing what they've been doing for years. And I was brought in to help elevate those strategies and those plans. And so the counsel that I would give you if you are ever in a situation where you're taking a piece of work that somebody else had to do, really understand how that emotionally impacts them. Are they happy about it? Are they frustrated? Do they feel like something's been ripped from underneath them? And I think having really honest conversations about this change to the structure, to the way things are done can be really helpful, because it basically shows you understand this is not comfortable for them, or it's going to be very new. But I think one of the things you can do is say, what does this then unlock in terms of their time and their capacity? So for example, most of these folks that I had to work with, marketing wasn't their superpower. It wasn't their background. And their backgrounds and their superpowers were usually in some other aspect of that business, like the actual business itself, for example, or maybe they were more strong in the PR realm or what have you. And so being able to have conversations around what they can then do more of because you're taking things off of their plate can be a helpful way for them to see things differently. Okay. So that's the number one thing. Be aware of what you're walking into and the dynamics that you're walking into it, because how you show up to a meeting is going to be a bit different based on how people are going to perceive you being there in the very first place. Now, even before all of this, before anything else really, what you need to be aware of in new companies and new roles is actually the baggage that you might be bringing with you. And my recommendation is don't bring any baggage. I can't tell you how many times I have written about, I have said, on my platforms that we have to clear our past so that we can show up to what's next without bringing those negative energy strings with us. And I'll be honest, if you are one of those that does this, you will be one of the select few, and you will have a much better start in your organization than anybody else, because you're willing to see, oh, what resentments am I carrying with me? What proving energy am I carrying with me? What relationships that went sour am I carrying with me, and therefore putting up boundaries and putting up walls where that they haven't been justified in this new place yet. Some of the things that you can do to help to clear this, of course, is go see a therapist, see a coach, talk with some friends about what's still sticking with you. You can also write a letter to your former employers or former employees or former colleagues, whatever it is, where you need to release the things that were hard, especially I think in situations where you left and it wasn't your choice. Nobody likes to feel disempowered. Nobody likes to feel like the choice was made for them. And so let it go. If you got laid off, you got laid off, honey. This is the world we operate in now. If you haven't gotten laid off, I would be like, what's going on? That's how much change and disruption and structure changes and all that is going on. So please, rule number 1, starting a new job, a new role, a new company, any of the above, is make sure you clear the baggage first so that you can come in with an open heart and open mind and not looking to prove anything from day one. So I usually, when I am interviewing for a new company or what have you, I usually ask a question in the interviews around how decisions are made. And this is really important because then you kind of understand the way things work, where are the power structures, all that good stuff. But the truth is that once you get into the role, you really need to pay attention to how decisions are made, who has the power, who has the influence. And you need to kind of lean back and understand how this operates, because you don't want to step on any landmines from the very beginning. And I don't think this is something that a lot of people think about. How are decisions made? Because, we're just trying to do our jobs. And the way different structures work, right? You have matrixed organizations, or maybe you have different priorities and you didn't realize that, or you didn't know who pulled the purse strings, all that good stuff. And you can find this out by asking questions, but you can also find this out by really paying attention to how things work. Anytime you start a new company, you really have to figure out how those, cranks are cranked. And it's okay. I think that you can also gain a lot of respect by asking these types of questions and investigating and saying who's the person that has their ear, and of course, all of this takes some nuance and takes some emotional intelligence, but this will help you hit the ground running in your organization for sure. Another way that you can ask these questions, whether it's in an interview or on the job, is to ask how things are rewarded or what gets rewarded. What kind of behavior gets rewarded? So you can take a look at, are there awards at the back of people's desks, on their walls? Where is there kind of public celebration, maybe in email trails? You can look for the overt and the subtle hints of what kind of behavior gets rewarded. And hopefully you have a sense of that before you've even taken the job. But getting to know that even further is really helpful. Okay, so like I said, I had started a new company, a new industry, a new job at the same time as this company was primarily run with Spanish language because it was a media company and the media was entirely in Spanish, the programming, the commercials, everything. So the corporate office, it was a bit different. There was a lot of English speakers and a lot of, obviously across the company, a lot of dual language speakers. But what I learned from this that compounded what I had learned in the past is that you have to get comfortable with not understanding everything all at once. And you have to be willing to sit in that and ask questions and also get to know the language that you're surrounded by. Now, that could be literal second language, but it might be getting to know the language that your engineers use, or getting to know the language that your consumer insights people use, or getting to know the language of your salespeople, and on, right? So it's about understanding the lingo. It's about not being afraid to lean in and say, what does that acronym mean? Because I think what happens is when we start new jobs, we want to come in and we want to show that we are smart and we're capable and we belong here. And what happens is when we hide what we're confused about, or we don't ask the questions about what things mean, then it's going to take you a lot longer to come up to speed. But also by showing that you don't know and being willing to honor that, you're being vulnerable and you gain respect that way. Because, that whole old way of leading in terms of having to have all the answers and know everything was never real. It was always bullshit. And now more than anything, being authentic about the things that you know about and the things you don't know about is really important, because you know what? People want to share their knowledge. They want to help you in your role. They want to see that they still have value. Of course they still have value, but that they can impart information with you and help you start successfully. I think that we underestimate what it means for people to feel needed. And that goes in work environments and that goes in personal environments too, right? Like, our friends want to feel like they're needed in your life, and your parents want to feel like they're needed in your life. And it's no different in the workplace. So you have to be willing to be immersed in the new and not shy away from it. Now, for me, I decided to take a couple Spanish lessons. I knew I was never going to, get to fluency quickly, if ever. But I knew that I wanted to get some base level. And that goes for you too. Maybe that you work really, really close with coders or something. Maybe you want to have some base level understanding so that you can have easier conversations. But also the effort goes a long way to say, yeah, I know that I'm in this totally different culture and totally different environment, and I'm bending your way. I'm not asking you to bend my way. So these are some of the things that, we may be taking for granted. Like, oh, people will accommodate me, when really the truth is the best type of leaders accommodate others and lean in on what they're already doing. And eventually, right, as we move forward and as we figure out things that we can improve, we may ask them to come back our way. But when you're starting something new and you're learning how things operate, you've got to lean in and see how they're operating, how their systems work, how their ways of working and procedures work, so that you can really do an honest assessment. I think that obviously each culture is different, but if you take more of an angle to lean back before you start to lean in and make changes, I think you're going to find you get more allies that way versus coming in without knowing a damn thing and you're trying to make a whole bunch of changes. I think that creates a heck of a lot more resistance than it does attracting support as you gradually introduce new ideas and concepts and prove them out. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is you may feel like a fish out of water. You may have a lot to learn. Look, for me, when I went into media and it was Spanish language and it was all these new things. It was in a consulting type of role, which was also new. You have to stand in the value that you bring. You have to be assertive with your beliefs about what types of things will work, while also being humble about what you have to learn. But you can't come in wavering, because those types of doubts that you have about yourself, other people will feel it. And unfortunately, some folks will prey on it. So you have to remember that everything that you're bringing to the table in your new organization is why they brought you in. And so you can't shy away from your perspective. This is so important. And it also is tied back to something else that I've talked about recently on my podcast, which is managing up. And the most important thing is that you make sure that you see your value in every room that you walk into and you put yourself on that same level. Because the minute you put yourself above or below someone else is the minute that you're either giving your power away or you're silencing those that work for you or alongside you. So you really need to understand that you belong in every room and trust that and be true to the incredible experience that you bring. There's no reason to doubt yourself because you wouldn't be there otherwise. But that's a whole nother soapbox that I won't get on with you right now. Here's the funny thing about the human behavior that I've noticed in kind of leadership transitions, career transitions, right? So when we're in between things, maybe we wanted it, or maybe we didn't ask for this in between phase. We are afraid to get support because we don't know what we're doing and we want more clarity before we make a move. And so we don't give ourselves support. And then when we jump into the new thing and we're like feeling better, maybe because we're more financially resourced at that point, and we're like, oh yeah, I got this. And then we don't give ourselves support in the new role because we're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. And the truth is that when you step into a new culture, a new business, a new company, a new job, like that's when you also need incredible support because you want to enter in successfully. And it's hard to see what is necessary and required when you're bringing your past with you and you still have a lot to learn about where you're going, and you have to learn a lot about the players that you're working with. And most people, when they start something new, there's also this like idea of, oh, I have this clean slate and I get to show up how I want and who I want to be. And doing that can be hard without pillars of support because we just go back to our old habits. So, I'm giving you these like tasters for how to enter in something new based on what I've learned. And the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is get support in that transition, for crying out loud. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's like, group masterminds. I don't know, but I have seen an incredible difference with the people that start something new with support and the people that don't. It's night and day, not just about your success and effectiveness as a leader, but also about how you're feeling in that, like your sense of contentment, your sense of pride, and, clearing any cobwebs of doubt. It goes so far. I can't understate that. So the next thing I really wanted to talk to you about is how important it is. I believe this is a life theme, to form your own opinions versus be swayed by the judgment of others or be swayed by their intent to recruit you for their perspective, to adopt their perspective. Because everybody has some kind of agenda, right? Like, let's just be honest. And I remember specifically, I started one new role and there was a very strong opinion that my manager had about someone, and had to be very clear with myself that I was not about to adopt their perspective because I wanted to form my own opinion. I felt that way about people in general and how I move through my life, because the experience that somebody has in whether it's a workplace or an individual is their experience. And it doesn't mean that's going to be my experience. And so I really try to look at things really objectively so that I can form my own opinion. This is a great rule of life, let me tell you. And, and we're all human. So we can catch ourselves making judgments, or we can catch ourselves, wanting to people please, or, say, yeah, I agree. Cause it's harder to say, you know what, I'm not really seeing that. But when we do that, we're being better leaders. One of the things that I learned in moving jobs was I had to make sure I was taking care of myself first and foremost. I've talked about it here. We have to put ourselves first in the equation of leadership because we cannot give what we don't have to give. And when we do put ourselves first, we are able to show up better for others, period. And so we come into new roles and we want to knock it out of the park, right? We want to and we're energized and we're excited and we just want to give it all. And maybe we want to give more than we have to give. But my advice to you is to put in boundaries so that you are not being all consumed by this new thing, especially because you're often going to be drinking from a fire hose in new roles. And you need time to integrate the new knowledge. You need time to integrate the new relationships, the new experience. And in one of my roles in particular, I was very aware that I didn't want to continue the pattern of overgiving and overdoing and being in this proving energy. And I would literally find commitments to make, right after the workday so that it would force me to get out of there and have balance. And I don't even like to use that word. I like to use the word integration because I think that's more real about how we live our lives these days. We integrate who we are into everything that we choose is a priority. So, starting new roles, make sure you are making time and space for reflection, for integration, for learning, because that's going to go so far in terms of how you are processing and making intentional choices about how you're showing up. If you're realizing, if I really stopped and processed my day, I could see that this person, I saw a little bit of fear in their eyes when I talked about this new idea, and this other person, I could see them crossing their arms and they were closing off their ideas, or they were closing, off to what I was saying. And so maybe I need to like slow down a little bit and spend more time building relationships before, sharing new ideas and building that trust, or slowing down and doing more education decisions or around ideas that you're bringing to the table. So creating space, not just for yourself and your self-care, but also to process what you're learning every day and what you're discovering, is going to help you in starting whatever is new. And I don't care if that's your job. I don't care if it's a volunteer opportunity, an extracurricular thing. I think this is sound advice for life in general. And so I welcome you to do that. All right. Well, listen, I think because we are in such rapid change and rapid uncertainty, knowing how to start new things well is a superpower and a skill that will set you apart. So I hope that you take all of this advice to heart. And if you're starting something new and you're like, yeah, like I want to do this differently, great. And if you want to reach out and you want to work together and you want some support in starting something new, I am here for it. I'm easy to find how to get a hold of in the show notes of whatever platform you're listening on. I would be honored to support you. I know how incredibly valuable it is. But also maybe you have a new team that's starting, or maybe you want to support some folks who are transitioning. Just reach out. I love this type of work because it's really about rewiring the way that we think and thinking a little bit differently with the new starts. We kind of have to look at our habits, most especially when we're starting something new, because we have to see what's serving us and what's not serving us, quite frankly. All right. I could go on and on with this topic, but I won't. I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Unlock Lab. And I hope that if you liked this episode, if you got something from it, please share it with someone that you care about. And also rate, review, or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, because that really helps get more people to level up in their leadership and find more contentment in their career. All right. I'm so glad you're here, and I'll see you next time on the Unlock Lab. Ciao for now.